Good morning. My name is Curtis Campbell, Senior Marketing Manager with Hughes Network Systems. We are very pleased that you've taken the time to join us this morning. We're very excited and for this webinar entitled "Everyone is a Video Producer," but really focusing on the concept of employee-generated content and how powerful that truly is. I'm joined here and very pleased to be joined here by Randy Polubiak, who's a digital media business communication strategist serving companies, associations, government agencies and departments over the last 35 years. Additionally, he's the author of Digital Touchpoints, How to Gain a Competitive Advantage Using Video and Dynamic Media, and has co-authored 2 industry books, Delivery of Media in the Enterprise and the Business TV IP Receiver Guide. So this morning we are going to run this webinar as a interactive discussion between myself asking several questions and Randy obviously providing responses. But should you have any questions, please do feel free to enter those into the chat log on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We will do our very best to get to all those questions at the very end of this webinar. So again, we are joined by Randy. Randy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good morning, Curtis. Good morning, everyone.
Yes. Perfect. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Most of you should be looking at the screens, and please obviously put in the chat log if you cannot see this. But we're going to just jump right into it, talking about employee-generated content. So, Randy, just to get things kicked off this morning, what in your mind, what's driving EGC or employee-generated content?
Well, that's a great question and a great starting point. I think prior to the getting into the bullets that I have here while people are looking at them, I'll share a little bit of background about what I believe were some of the key things that contributed to it. One of which was the Digital Transition Act of 2005 that required U.S. TV stations to convert from analog to digital. And this had to be completed by 2009 with the purpose of freeing up the bandwidth from what was the analog transmission method. By going to digital, it provided bandwidth for emergency services and wireless communications. And I think everybody is probably able to recognize the benefits that we've gotten from that as consumers and individuals because of the mobile media capacity and utilization that we're all able to take advantage of. So with that helped develop the smartphones and the tablets as devices that included cameras that today are competitive with the cameras that are in many production facilities or enterprise video production operations. So we have the tools that are available to us. They're affordable. Compared to what it costs for cameras years ago, everybody can probably relate to the fact that they're holding something in their hand for a few $100s versus what would have been an investment of tens of thousands of dollars going back 5, 10 years ago. So with this fact that everyone has the tools, they're embracing the digital media and the capabilities to create video, they're able to afford it, and they are familiar with using these tools on a personal basis as individual consumers. That's also making them very capable of producing content by acquiring it and by editing it on their own devices. The software is now readily available. So everybody has the capabilities at their hands to be able to create and provide and share content. So with that, they're interacting with their peers. They are sharing it. They're using it with the devices that they carry around. So it's becoming very convenient for them to participate in the development and creating of what industry-wide, or let's say on a consumer basis, is known as user-generated content. But we're applying the employee-generated content EGC title to those of us in the enterprise space. And ultimately, everyone's able to view the content on their small screens as well as the large screen displays. Going back to the comment before about the digital transition, this was a time that actually drove high-definition television as well. You can look back and see that the HD TV screens and the content now became available and affordable. So in your homes or in the corporate space, you're implementing television screens and the content to display on it. Over the last 5 years, it probably without that requirement, we wouldn't be where we are today. So that's kind of a little detailed overview of that. Hopefully that's helpful to people.
Sure, perfect. No, that's awesome. Thank you for that overview. Yeah, obviously we are, we being digital media players ourselves, it's the power of employee generated content really is out there, because we're seeing a lot of people pick up their devices and record that. So, okay, so we're going to move on here. Got another couple of questions for you. Another question, just coming up is why do employees create video content? What's compelling them to use corporate video and media production departments?
Well, this is another very good question that is resonating throughout the enterprise space, and I think everyone on the webinar is probably experiencing this or seeing it or have seen it. With what we just said before, where everyone is using the tools, quite frankly, they believe that they can create content and probably easier and, as we say here, quicker and cheaper than if in some cases that they go to their internal media production or video production organization. They believe that not all the time. I need to clarify that, because quite frankly, and we'll talk about this later, institutionally the organization can produce product probably at a higher quality, should be able to produce it at a higher quality and with much more production values than the typical employee-generated content that they may find. But nonetheless, they're not able to go everywhere, be everywhere that many of the employees or executives need to be. And so as a matter of convenience, these individuals are going to record content that they perceive as being usable for other applications throughout the organization. There's also the probability that some of them are subject matter experts, so they know and understand what their topic is and probably are able to utilize these less expensive, more affordable production equipment packages to record themselves or other people on those topics. Bottom line is now, after a number of years of creating some of their own content, many of them believe that they are qualified producers. This may or may not be true. My guess is that a percentage of these individuals probably do a pretty good job. However, it's typical or logical to think that they haven't gone through the proper training or extensive training, so there are some nuances and some elements of production, video production, that they're not as familiar with. And so their production may not have the production quality values and techniques to make it stellar information and packaged videos, but nonetheless, it's very likely that they're capturing content that can be and is valued to the organization. But at the bottom line of it, unless they're absolutely told that they cannot do this and make it available on corporate media channels, they do it because they can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's a very good. The reason I asked that question is because the concept of people producing their own videos and wondering how that production quality plays into it. So that's a fantastic answer. So thank you very much.
Welcome, sir.
So I got another question here for you. So, I mean, obviously you've written a lot of articles in your life, and you've had the opportunity to work with a lot of people throughout your distinguished career. But in a couple of articles, you mentioned that short videos and corporate messages and stories aren't necessarily new. Can you go ahead and explain that?
Yeah, this may be one person's opinion, but as you said at the outset, I've been doing this for quite a while, and I think the interesting aspect of it is the younger people, the millennials, they tend to be very excited about this capability, and quite frankly, a lot of people in the media and other places reference it this way, that this is a great trend. This is something new, and short is great, and shorter is better. And I don't deny any of that. But what I will say is that as far as the story content and messages are concerned, if you really look throughout the organization, much of that doesn't change. Now, of course, some of it's timely, some of it's seasonal, but what the in-house production and video people are responsible for is capturing and telling stories about the organization, what their executives have to say, what the training techniques are. And my point is that content, that information is relatively similar to what's been at play forever, going back to the early 80s when I started getting involved in enterprise and corporate video. And I will say that the concept of brief clips is not new. This is something that also going back to that time, doing 30, 60, 90-second vignettes and small clips has been done. It had been done since that time. So the idea of doing short clips and using video is I say here, has survived the test of time. It's been there forever. The need to provide relevant and timely content is the most important aspect of that, and it has been there forever. So the next slide, actually, if you go to that, Curtis, addresses, so what has changed? And I think the key thing is that the tools to create, manage, deliver, and track the content is more robust than ever. The capabilities are there. As we've mentioned earlier, it's affordable, so everyone is able to afford it to the point where employees themselves own it, not just the institution. And a fact that we have here is that we now have cell phones that are capable of shooting 4K video. That's superior than the video that's being shot in most corporate organizations. You know, some organizations are still working with standard definition. Most of them now are in high def, but not at the level of the 4K cameras. I do want to say that the audio that comes with the cameras is not typically the same quality that you get of the video, but nonetheless, the smartphones are shooting 4K video. So the tools have changed to capture it, to edit the video, and the capabilities have advanced significantly. And this has allowed virtually anyone in an organization to be able to create, produce, and share video content. So at the end of this particular section here, our society is totally video-centric, and we're able to take advantage of it and use these tools to create what is being more distributed on a more widespread basis or available on a more widespread basis. And the fact that they are shorter clips, they are not the 1, 2, and 4 hour training segments and information segments that you may have seen more of in the earlier years, and probably that's what discouraged people from using a lot of video. But the content, the messages are similar, the same. The tools are improved and better. The length is, as we'll say in another slide, to be addressed appropriately for what the content would require and what the audience is receptive to.
Perfect. Yeah, that's actually, I wish I had something to add to that, but that's fantastic insight. So, okay, I got another question for you. What are the benefits for companies starting to encourage employee-generated content? You know, any kind of benefits, whether they're content benefits or really in your mind, and based on your experience, what are those benefits that companies are using to encourage employee-generated content?
Well, I think first and foremost, the trend that's happened over the last couple of years is we've gone from organizations being concerned from the institutional side of it, wanting to maintain control of all video content, and not too long ago discouraged the use of employee-generated content, to try and contain and maintain it with the idea of quality and protecting the brand. But essentially, we've gotten to the point now where this is out of the gate. You're not going to stop it. It's like a freight train. So as long as it's going to happen, you need to take advantage of it and leverage it, because what you have out there is a large base of corporate storytellers, including those subject matter experts that I mentioned earlier. These are people who are on the spot, on the scene, in the area, or know the topics that can be taken advantage of or leveraged to a positive sense. And the content that they are shooting and creating, that needs to be leveraged across the enterprise so that as long as it's approved content, we'll talk about that a little bit later, content that fits the parameters or the guidelines that meet the brand requirement. But it's on topics also that are relevant to other people. The organization should in fact embrace the use of it and encourage the use of this content and grow this corporate base of video assets. I'll give you an example. There are a lot of activities and events, maybe conventions, maybe presentations that employees are presenting or attending or being at the head of, that by having people in the field record these events for them, maybe not the whole presentation or the whole executive discussion can be recorded and used for many things, but there may be snippets of content and information that can be captured that could be used and available to the organization that you may not get if you did not have the employees out there capturing that content. It may be too expensive in some cases, or too inconvenient, or maybe just impossible to have your own staff or resources go to all of these locations. So take advantage of that extended base of field reporters in a sense. So this gives you that expanded coverage of activities, events. It saves time, saves resources, and it provides the possibility, the probability that this video content can and would be readily available and easily accessible over an enterprise-wide video ecosystem.
Perfect. I'd like to maybe add a question here is, you know, you mentioned the savings of time and resources as part of the benefits of EGC. What kind of time and resources are we talking about that a company can maybe expect to save in rolling out an EGC strategy?
Well, that's a good question, and actually I think the next slide kind of hits on, you know, a summary of this whole thing, that employees are demanding or requiring content, and that meaning more video content. And the essence of this conversation here, this presentation, is around video content. So to do that, that means that if they're going to have this insatiable thirst to want to get it, you have to provide it, whether it's communications or training related. The question is, do you have the staff that can capture and record and make available this content? So timing-wise and resource-wise, you know, everyone's in a tough time where they do not have the large staffs that they may have had years ago. They may outsource, they may have extended services, managed services that support that. Everybody has a different model. But with that is a head count, body count, and their availability. If they're on other projects, or if something has come up on a short notice that there's a need or an interest to record it, they may not have the staffing resources to do that. But yet having someone in the field with the smartphone that they may have, or tablet or other device that they could record it, that event, that content could be captured. So it makes it timely, it makes it convenient, and the people who are scheduled to be on the site because it's related to their specific area of interest, or they're part of it, then that means that they're there anyway. So something may be available and captured there. So that ties into the resources, the timeliness, and the potential cost savings. I don't ever want to suggest to encourage to just rely on the employees to capture the content, because there are too many events that you need the higher quality and let's say well-produced, well-thought-out the development and or capturing of the content that comes either with your internal video staffing organizations or you might get from external staffing organizations for video production services. But we're at a point where you have to feed the beast. That you have to get the content, and to do that, it's not going to be able to be done many times with just the staff resources. Does that help out?
No, very good answer. Thank you. I'm sure we'll dive into pieces of this deeper as we can continue through the presentation. So, got a couple more slides that I'd like to review and chat with you about. Obviously, we want to go through some recommendations for an effective strategy. So, what in your mind, what are some of the recommendations you can suggest to help companies embrace, encourage, and utilize employee-generated content?
Well, I think in today's world, with so much that's taking place in our space, and our role in the video and media organizations is expanded to produce more content, to work with any and all departments, to be involved in the distribution, probably working with IT and telecom folks in the organization to address all the different media channels that you have. And then dealing with all the potential employees that may be generating this content. You need to figure out how to leverage these resources, whether they're internal or external, and look at it differently. This is a media world, even though we're talking about video, it's a media world that's far different than the traditional video that we would have associated it with years ago, where it was more readily and easily capable of controlling the content, because what you're pushing through the funnel was far less. Now there's far more, but learn how to leverage it. Resist it, don't fight it. It's there, and you need to learn to take advantage of it. And by the way, if you don't, the silos are going to go up around you or beside you, and what may not be a very desirable situation is to have a number of different departments and organizations buying equipment and or using equipment to create their own content and not moving it and working it through your channels. You need to benchmark against other organizations for best practices. That's always going to be a standard recommendation and guideline. What are people doing today to encourage and support the increased use of user-generated content? I strongly suggest engaging with industry providers for guidance and support. And the reason for that is the next bullet point. The video ecosystem that you need to now manage the workflow, to manage the amount of content, is far different than years ago. It's got to be more widespread so that people are easily and readily able to contribute content as well as to search out, locate, find, and use and view the content. So that enterprise video ecosystem needs to be developed and built in a way for automated workflow as much as possible, with as many authorized contributors and users as is appropriate for your organization, and it should be flexible so it can expand as it needs to facilitate the amount of content and the amount of viewers and the amount of viewing that's taking place. Excuse me. Along with that, you need to develop a standardized guideline and the processes that can assist with this influx of video content, and establish a governance team to protect the brand. What I mean by that is that you need a handful of people, and it can vary anywhere from 4 or 5 people up to 5, 6, or 10, depending on the size of the organization and who's involved in it. But they need to be very good, strong representative stakeholders of all of the respective groups, those who are contributing as well as those who are supporting and or facilitating the use of video. If you go to the next slide, that would move us into some additional recommendations on what may be helpful to everybody.
No, that's perfect. In fact, before I did move on, though, there's actually a couple of questions, and I know I said we'd leave questions to the end, but I think there's a couple of questions that have come in that are extremely applicable to what you've been talking about right here. And we have a guest on the line that's asked us, how do you control how do you ensure or control that proper content is delivered across the organization? So I don't know if you want to address that now or if you want to save that to the end. And there's another question that's part of that, which I believe is that who owns the content when it's contributed? So I don't know if you want to take a stab at those now or just save them to the end.
Well, let me take a stab at it. I'll do the second one first. So I think it's going to be different for every organization. There's no model that's going to be ideal for everybody, and that's because of a lot of different reasons. And one is what type of organization is it? And there's just a significant difference between being a field service organization and a manufacturer or a retailer. And it's also a matter of culture, what the brand is and what the branding guidelines are. You need to probably parallel the employee-generated content guidelines against the branding guidelines, and how is that managed and how is it controlled. And keep in mind that many of the branding guidelines are related to the different channels. The ones that are, let's say, media video related, for instance, are very likely to have so many similarities that you can mold or blend the employee-generated content guidelines and controls with that. So in some cases, especially if it's a government organization, it's going to be very strict, and the security requirements are going to be very strict, and there's going to be a lot more limitations on who is able to have access to the content or provide the content. And it's going to be a matter of what departments. Are there departments in public affairs or customer affairs that are responsible for the branding that may also have an influence on who will be responsible for employee-generated content? So I'm going to be very general in that answer that says just be very meticulous at benchmarking and utilizing information from other organizations similar to yours or type and vendors. Lean on the vendors again, because my belief is vendors have customers and have user bases that if they're set up nicely and they share content and they share information, they're a tremendous resource to lean on and to get their guidance. So that's a very general answer. Hopefully it gives a little bit of guidance for you. And I'm going to ask you to repeat the first question.
Yeah, the first question was, how do you control that proper content is delivered across the organization?
Well, with the guidelines and the way things are established, you have the Wild West out there in a sense that was really out of control years ago, where people were putting it on YouTube and companies would find out about it, hear about it. If they were doing a good job, they were policing it and having to retrieve it. But if a ecosystem's built out where the recommended and suggested way to create and provide any content is first and foremost through the enterprise process, then it's going to be coming into their ingest solution and into their content management system. And if properly done, not only do you build it, but you train, inform, and educate everybody on that. We'll touch on some of this in the next slide, but the bottom line is if they're working with you and you're working with them, then you're going to know what's being created and what's going to be included, and you're going to have a much better handle on what's being done in a way that's approved and not violating any licensing issues and rights. So create that path for them to be able to contribute and share and distribute over the various approved media channels by the organization. Let's go to the next slide if we could.
Yeah, you got it.
Help me keep my thoughts together a little bit. And this is the last slide, just so people can be comfortable with that. As I was saying, put together a training program, but put it together on video production values, things such as audio, lighting, composition of the content, and the idea, the concept of shooting horizontally. People with the smartphones are inherently going to shoot for social media, which means it's vertical. But the truth be told, if they're not told to shoot horizontally, so that it can be used more readily and easily for the corporate application, then they're not going to be thinking about it. So make sure that they understand that the audio quality is not going to be as good unless there's an external microphone. The lighting, there's good and bad things that you can take into account, and certainly not every environment or every setting provides good lighting and you may not be able to subsidize it, but they need to understand the importance of lighting. And then the framing and the composition. Those are 3 or 4 basic elements that you'd be surprised how many employees just overlook that or don't think about that. And so with that training course or training practice, that would be moving this content a lot more forward in terms of usable content for the enterprise. As we said earlier, make it the most appropriate length. Some of these just do need to be short clippets. And if there's a very distinguished presentation or some significant content being done at a conference or trade show, and someone's recording 15 or 20 minutes of it, that may not be good or necessary, but they may get a 2 or 3 minute clip that is golden to some applications down the line. So take into account the length. As everyone in our space knows, make sure that they use only properly licensed music and other content, for instance, if they're borrowing it from other video sources, and get the proper talent releases. But provide the standardization, the formats, the guidelines, the policies. And I'll add to that organizations now are starting to build, let's call it an inventory for their employees, an inventory of equipment to capture it, mostly cameras and things, so that they know the quality that they're getting. To have a half dozen or maybe even a dozen camera packages, small lighting packages that people can check out, just like if they're on in a library checking out a book. Give them the tools that shows that you have more understanding and, let's say, appreciation for what they do, plus you have more control of what's going on. I believe that they would be more likely to use that equipment versus their own equipment if you were providing it, and knowing that it was going to be done on the formats and to the quality level that you like, so that when they come back later, if they need help in editing it or packaging it, finishing it off, that they would get support and you would probably be able to assist them in a more timely and affordable manner, going back to some of the earlier reasons why they shoot their own content, if they're following your guidelines from the beginning. So this is just a few of the key things to point out as potential guidelines for you.
No, that's great. It's very, very helpful. Just and I apologize. You've already touched on this a little bit, but really, we've gotten a lot of questions about the concept of protecting it, an organization protecting itself from an employee contributing something they didn't have rights to. So, you mentioned in this slide, acquire talent releases and use properly licensed music and content. What for those who are on this call, what recommendations? How do they go about securing that kind of permissions, if you will? Because a lot of these people, we're talking about employee-generated content. These employees may have gold content, but if they happen to have something that's professionally licensed, what best practices have you seen work in this space?
Well, employees are not on their own going to go out and get licenses for music or other content. However, they may go out and identify music that they really like and that they'd like to edit or cut their videos to. And if they're not aware of the fact that that's likely to be putting the company in a very compromising position, then it's unfortunate for everybody. However, every organization is going to have some music library that they use, and it may be a little bit of a hassle on occasion for them, but they need to make sure that everybody understands, come to them to inquire about what the music licensing is. The corporation's going to have a licensing contract with one of the licensing companies, music companies, and or they're going to buy packages from the music providers, the industry music providers. And those are generally good general licenses that can cover not everything, but a lot of stuff that would be appropriate. And, each employee may find out that, well, I'm not exactly getting the specific song that I would have really liked to use. It's very current and contemporary right now for whatever reason. But the odds are pretty good that it's going to be covered under those licensing agreements. So they just need to go to their media department, find out what's available, and that could be a training course in and of itself that says, look, the better we inform you up front, and we'll cover some of these things along with production values, the more educated you'll be, the more streamlined the process will be, and the less likely you're going to get us into trouble. Probably at some point, most organizations out there and people who are on the webinar have stories to tell about experiences where one of the licensing organizations somehow chanced upon hearing how they may have used an unlicensed clip at one of their major events, and that would have started a process that they would have liked to have avoided. Not too many companies have been able to get through the last 10, 15 years without dealing with issues like that, but the key thing is to minimize those occurrences. So training, educating, and providing support and insight and guidance to the employees is the suggestion.
No, that's very helpful. So we're running close to the end of our window here for this webinar, but we do have another question that I think we definitely want to address. Is have you seen the need for employees to be incentivized before they contribute content, or in your experience, are enough employees naturally willing to contribute without being incentivized?
Well, I get the opportunity to work with, talk with, and engage with a number of organizations, and I don't know that I've ever heard that they're struggling to find people to shoot it, that it's mostly the other thing where in years past they tried to contain, control, discourage it, and now we're to the point where it's happening, and that there are a lot of people who are more than willing to shoot it. They want to shoot it for whatever reason, because they know they're going to be there, or they know that they need that capturing of that event somewhere down the line. So I would say it's less likely that they're having to look for people to do it. And if they were there, they probably would not have a difficult problem. If they knew something was going on that needed to be recorded, they would just go to the source of the department that's involved and responsible for it. And like I mentioned earlier, if the organization has an inventory of equipment that they can provide, so that they know what they're going to get in return, instead of wondering what kind of, let's say, smartphone or capturing device that someone may be using, that's very likely that it's not going to be a difficult situation to get someone to do it. But I'd say more than anything, they're more likely to just inform, educate, train, tell people they can do it, tell them how to go about doing it, tell them how to come to them and when to come to them for advice. And I might say distinguish clearly between what is institutional events and content that should be recorded and managed by the centralized organization's video organization versus having a bunch of individuals go out and do it. By distinguishing clearly between the two, I think those would be very helpful for people to know when and where they could and should intervene and be recording the content.
Perfect. And maybe just one very quick question that I'd like to make sure we cover here, and that is, so we've talked a lot about the best practices and recommendations for employee-generated content, as well as protecting corporations. But based on your last 35 years of experience, once companies have a library of this employee-generated content, what channels are you seeing them utilize that content and really experience some growth and positivity from?
Well, that's an excellent question, and that gets into a whole other topic that is relevant to everybody, and that is there's so many different media channels in every organization today compared to years ago. So whether it's online for the internet and using something like YouTube or a corporate video channel, or the intranet, the video content, if it's in the right repository and has a part of the whole ecosystem we've talked about before, where it's a system that has the content management capabilities to it, that's expanding with the volume that's being shot and provided. And keep in mind, we went to high def, and now we're going to 4K. Some people are shooting in red eye and maybe moving to maybe in a while 8K. They have to have an ecosystem that is able to grow and expand as the size of the files are growing. And so the importance of that is to develop that in a way that's well thought out today so that it's good 3 and 5 years down the line, that says that content can be managed, controlled, and accessed, that can be played and shared over those internet, or over the internet, the intranet, over the digital signage network that almost every organization now has some type of signage throughout the building, and the content could and should be available to that. It should be available in different formats, and so available on all of the mobile devices and at the desktop, in addition to just going to televisions in the break room and throughout the organization. So put a lot of thought into it, and make sure that as you're building out the pieces, all the incremental pieces that you're putting together are with some forethought that they can complement the system, the infrastructure that's available on campus, on premise, or over a wide area network if it's going to hundreds of thousands of locations out in the field, whether it's a terrestrial or a satellite delivered network. The idea is conceptually to make sure that it's being captured, edited, converted over all the formats that can address all these different media channels. So, and that supports everybody, not just the training organization or the communications group, but the sales and marketing people are having to use and think about how to leverage the same infrastructure. And of course, the IT organization and the comms people, they have to be the ones to support it, build it out, support it, enforce it, make sure that it's secure. So all of these departments and individuals need to be part of the process to determine what is needed and build out the system, the solution that will address all these different media channels. I love that topic. That's a great one.
Yeah, and that might be worth it doing a follow-up webinar to this one that we're doing this morning. So, okay, well, that wraps up the time we have for this morning. So, Randy, I certainly appreciate your time, and would just remind everybody on this conversation, we are both very passionate about this topic. Randy has a lifetime of experience of best practices in the digital media space, so I'd encourage you to continue the conversation with both Randy and myself. You can find Randy, he's definitely very social media savvy, so you can find him on LinkedIn under Randy Polubiak, or on Twitter at Enlighten, and that's ENLITEN. Or you can follow me, Curtis Campbell, on LinkedIn, or at C. Campbell HMS, and HMS is an acronym for Hughes Media Solutions. So we certainly appreciate your time. Randy, again, thank you so much for your expertise and your insight, and we thank you for joining us. And we encourage you to continue to follow this topic, and we look forward to working with you in whatever capacity we have the opportunity to do so. Thank you again very much, and have a great day. Bye-bye now.